How's everyone doing? I'm Ileana. I'm part of the staff, and today's topic will be the value of the existence of ISTQB TM course in today's increasingly agile world. Our guest for today is going to be Mr. Joe Elledge. He's a tester and a risk manager, has been working at Expleo for 23 for iSQI and ISTQB certification courses with the Expleo Academy. Mr. Joe has worked with a variety of industries, including telecoms, banking, insurance, automotive, and medical devices in a variety of countries, including UK, Ireland, Germany, India, America, Scandinavia, and Switzerland. Let me introduce you to Mr. Joe Elledge.
Hi there, is it time for me to speak? I am unfortunately in a situation where I'm watching the stream partly on my mobile phone so that I can see what's going on. And, there seems to be a little bit of a time delay. So hopefully all is well. I hope you're all having a jolly lovely Tuesday evening and that I can share a little bit of information with you with any luck. So the topic that I have popped on the screen is about whether or not the ISTQB's Test Manager course still holds value in today's increasingly agile world. Obviously, I missed the word increasingly off of this slide. The reason that I have asked this question, and I'm hoping that you will join in and put in questions or comments or observations that we can all share, is because the lovely Debbie from ISTQB was asking for volunteers for giving some presentation. And because it was ISTQB who was asking, the work that I do with ISTQB, mainly delivering ISTQB courses, came very much to mind. And this question that you see on the screen is one that I'm asked quite often as a trainer. People come into the classroom and they work in more and more often agile environments, and they want to know, is this course, which has a name which looks very traditional and perhaps even a reputation for being constructed at a time when the world was more waterfall or more sequential, does it still hold value for them going forward? So before we go a little into the question, let's find out a little bit about who I am and why I am asking this question, and perhaps even why I might be someone who can help offer some answer to the question when it comes to it. So my name is Joe Elledge. You can probably see a video of me, I'm not sure, but I've got a few pictures of me. That was me about 3 years ago. This was me about 2 years ago. This was me about 1 year ago. And this was me about 1 month ago. So we can see the horrible damage that the COVID pandemic has done to my waistline and to my beard. There was a time when I was slimmer. It's lovely working from home, but working this close to the fridge and the kitchen is just far too dangerous. As the English tend to say, beware the man, be his brother.
Mr. Elledge, sorry to interrupt you. Can you share the screen, please?
Sorry, can I share the screen? Yeah, I thought I was. Oh dear, perhaps I was not. My bad. Let me get to the right piece of technology. Okay, hopefully. Let me go back. And is it showing okay now?
Yes.
Good. Okay. So there's the question that I was talking about, which I had put up on the screen, but apparently it wasn't sharing. We'll try that earlier. There we go. I can see it now. And then the pictures I had showed of myself were, there's me 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 1 year ago, 1 month ago. So as I said, the pandemic has done terrible damage to my waistline and to my chin. The English have a saying, beware the man, be he friend or brother, whose hair is one coloured and beard another. So we had to make it go away. And now you see me without the beard. But who am I? I've been testing for 23 years. All of those 23 years were with Expleo, or one of its previous names. I started in 1997 as a junior test analyst and spent the first years of my career doing functional test automation. Then I moved into performance testing, and then latterly I started doing some training. So 15 years of training, the BCS and ISTQB materials in particular. So from the days of the early foundation and the practitioner exam, 10-day training course, and 3-hour written exam through to current times. My career around Agile, as it says there, I attended my first daily stand-up in November 1997, just a couple of months after starting my career as a tester. And that's a fact that I still like to mention every now and then, because of course Agile didn't come into being as a word until February 2001, but the lightweight methodologies were around before then. And I did my first Agile project in August 2001. So I've got a little bit of experience in testing and a little bit of experience in Agile. And around Agile training, I used to teach the certified Agile tester, so testing and training, of course, my thing, but alas, that's gone, rest in peace. And nowadays I'm accredited to deliver the fundamentals for IC Agile, the product owner and the tester courses. So my career with testing and Agile goes on. I also do some internal training for Expleo. So this pictures the question, does the test manager course hold value in today's Agile world? As I was saying, I put this question forward because ISTQB was asking for something, and that caused me to think about perhaps a question around this topic. And as I mentioned, because this is a question I'm asked in the classroom a lot when teaching the test manager course. I've also previously done a presentation to a conference like this one, where I stood before the audience, or in fact on that occasion I stood among the audience because I was able to move down among people and ask a similar question, but slightly different, which was just, do the ISTQB qualifications hold any value? This was a few years ago when Agile was on the rise in the testing world and people were questioning whether ISTQB was a thing. And we weren't thinking about it from an Agile perspective. We were just asking, do qualifications still matter? And we held that presentation, if you will, as a conversation. I didn't have lots of slides, like I don't have too many slides today. And I stood amongst the room and asked the question, does it have value? And I asked people to put forward their observations, their experiences, and their questions. I was kind of hoping that today we'd be able to do a similar thing, but unfortunately I can't see what you might type quite in real time, but the lovely ladies behind the scenes can receive comments from you and they can pass those forward to me. So if at any time throughout the next 25 minutes or so you have a question about the topic as pitched, or about anything that I mention or anything that I say, please type that question in. I'd really rather this was a bit more interactive and a bit more fun than just me talking at a blank screen on my own for half an hour. So if you've got a question, or like I said, an observation, a story, then share it. It'd be nice to know the value and your thoughts on the value. And then at the end, we will have a chance for some questions as well. But by all means, share. Because I can't make it quite live and I can't just ask you to all type and share things on the screen, I'm going to have to chat away, and I have got a few little slides to launch on, to go into that. So, in order to start answering this question, does the ISTQB Test Manager course hold value? I think the first question we have to ask is, what does it actually teach? What does it cover? What does it do? Is it a course for teaching these things called test managers to make people into a beast which we are told perhaps in Agile we don't need so much? Or is it a course that addresses something else? Well, if we have a look at the headings from the course, the ISTQB Test Manager has 7 chapters of heading. There they are. And it's not really trying to make people into this thing called a test manager beast. It is a course which is teaching principles and concepts and concerns around management and around specifically, of course, test management. And although we might say and argue that in an agile world we don't need test managers in quite the same way that we need them in a traditional waterfall environment, the question is, of course, do we still need management? And I would suggest that the answer is yes. Also, Raoul Tifrea, I think, or Raoul Tifrea, I apologise for whatever poor pronunciation I've done, has put up a question. It says, is there a newer syllabus than the one from 2012? For the test manager, I don't believe there is. I think 2012 is the currently live syllabus. I think 2018 the foundation updated, but the test manager is due. The test analyst has just been updated, and the technical test analyst. So it must be on its way. But I think 2012 is still the one. And that's a really good question when you think about it, isn't it? Because it's making a point. This is 9 years old, and Agile has come a long way in the last 9 years. So that may lead us to an answer about the conclusions at the end that I'm going to make. So that was a really well-timed question, I feel. But what I was saying was the test manager course isn't really trying to make a beast called a manager. It's trying to teach management. And I was posing a rhetorical question: do we still need management? And although the way I've pitched the question almost begs the answer no from an agile point of view, of course, from an agile point of view, the answer actually is yes, because an agile team is described as a self-managing team. So it is not like management has gone away. I remember very happily teaching the course called the Certified Agile Tester, which was a lovely 5-day training course, which had its challenges, but it tended to have lots of lovely value for the delegates. And one particular occasion, a chap walked into the classroom on the Monday morning, and we were introducing each other, and he was being introduced, and he said this. He said, "I'm really looking forward to this course. I really want to know more about Agile." And I said, "That's terrific. That's the attitude we want. We're going to have a great time." And on the 4th day of the course, on the Thursday in the morning, we were reflecting on the week so far, and he said this. He said, "I really hate Agile." And I said, "That's strange. Why do you really hate? Oh, excuse me, my voice called." I said, "Why do you really hate Agile?" And he said, "Because you're turning me into a project manager, and I hate project managers." But the thing was, we weren't turning him into a project manager, but suddenly he was realizing that in an agile world, the team is self-managing. This management stuff goes on. Things still have to be done. Control is still there in some way. And now it was the team that was having to do it instead of the project manager. So the point I'm trying to make, of course, is that the ISTQB's Test Manager course isn't trying to make beasts called test managers. It's trying to teach the principles and concepts and concerns of managing a testing team. And in an agile environment, the team is still managed. It's just self-managing. All of the issues, all of the principles, all of the concerns don't go away. On the contrary, they may be needed more, because in Agile we plan, and often we plan daily. So let's just have a little look at the topics that are here and just think about, do they fit or don't they? Are they needed? Because perhaps there's some other conclusion we're going to reach at the end. So the first thought is process. The process section of the ISTQB is looking at the testing process that they put forward. And if you put that on paper and you read it, it reads very much as a linear sort of process. It looks very, for want of a better word, unagile. It does planning and then analysis and then design and then implementation and execution. And these things read like stages in a sequential process that are awful and not at all agile. But I think when you step back from it and take a think about it, it's not a sequential waterfalling of software development. It's a logical process of testing. I mean, what does it say at the start? We plan. Well, we plan a lot in Agile. We plan every day. That's how valuable planning is. We plan at the beginning of a sprint. We plan at the beginning of an iteration. We plan at the beginning of a release. We plan at the beginning of every day with the stand-up. So planning doesn't vanish. And then the elements of the test process, analysis, design, implementation, execution, they're just the logical stages in testing. You have to analyze. You have to know what to test. In Agile, we still do analysis. We don't go and analyze a big written document called the requirements. We analyze the user stories and we look at the acceptance criteria and we participate in the 3 amigos or the whatever name you wish to give to the discussion around elaborating the user stories. And we what is analysis here? As a tester, what does analysis mean? It means to think, to consider the situation, to understand the context, to work out what needs to be tested and what doesn't need to be tested. And that still has to happen in Agile. What does design mean? Design means to take the idea that I've come up with during my analysis, to take this nugget of a concept of a test and start to put some flesh on the bones of that test, to select the data, identify the expected results. And these are things that I have to do, even, even Agile, but in testing of any type. Implementation simply means to prepare, writing the test, getting ready to execute the test. We can do that in Agile. And then finally, execution means execution. So although it's called process, and as you write it, it looks like a linear process, it's just describing the logical stages of testing. And those things don't go away, they don't change. So the discussions we can have there as part of the course around the challenges of errors, defects, and failures, and so on, are all still valuable. Every tester needs to be aware of this. And everybody who's going to do testing on the Agile project needs to be aware of these ideas. I'm not saying everybody must attend this course, but everybody needs to be aware of these ideas to some degree who will do testing. So this chapter still has the value that it has under the sort of waterfall or V model structures. It still is teaching us about test creation, test design, test execution, and it's telling us the importance and value of planning and of communication at the end, both of which are things Agile loves to do. The biggest section of the ISTQB's Test Manager course is the chapter called Management. In fact, it's so big. See if you can work out who's having fun with animations today. That would be Joe. It's got all of these subsections in it. And so let's just have a little quick look at those. Do they still offer value? Do they go away? Are they valueless to people in an Agile world? Well, the introduction is irrelevant in that sense, but test management in context. Now, context simply means the circumstances in which I find myself. Agile is a context. Agile is a circumstance in which we find ourselves. Test management, I'm going to suggest, still has to happen because Agile teams are self-managing teams. So that hasn't changed. So we've got to establish that context. We can discuss the context of test management in an Agile world. So there's value in this conversation. The second part of this management chapter is called risk-based testing and other approaches for prioritization. Well, prioritization here means to put the tests in the right order, to run them in the best possible order, to make sure, of course, that I'm focusing my testing into the right place, that I'm getting the right people to do it at the right time, that I'm spending the right amount of time on it. And all of those things still happen in Agile. There's no change there. I can still use risk-based testing, or the equivalent, I guess, of requirements-based testing in an Agile environment is user story testing. So I can still use these different techniques to help me work out which tests to do. That section of the test manager course also does a little bit of a dive into risk and risk management, and understanding risk and project risk and product risk. And those things are absolutely equally valuable in Agile as they are in Waterfall. In fact, perhaps Agile would pride itself on responding to business risk in a more proactive way. So an understanding of risks and what the role they play in testing is very important. And you may have noticed in my introduction that one of the little feathers in my cap, I didn't mention it on the slides, is as a risk manager outside the context of testing, because I found that the patterns and behaviors in testing reflect and mirror exactly the patterns of risk management in any other context. And that's how integral risk is to what we do. But that's a whole topic I can be boring about for another day. This perhaps is the section of this chapter which really lets itself down from an Agile point of view. I've started out by making the point that this course, the Agile Test Manager, is teaching principles, it's teaching concepts, it's teaching fears and concerns, things that we need to know in order to manage testing, that it's not making a beast called manager. Well, perhaps at this one point it is a little bit doing the latter. It is making the beast called manager, because it's not telling us why we have to manage testing. It's not telling us the principles or fears. It is trying to tell us, in some ways, how to do it. It is defining test documentation that the test manager should produce. And that is test documentation that I would argue in an Agile world is not needed. The policy is, the strategy is, but the test plans aren't, because the team plans as a whole. So there's no real value to a separate test plan in most teams. So there's a black mark against the course from an Agile perspective. Estimation, does that hold value? Well, of course, estimation in Agile is very important. It's something you will discuss on any Agile course. You might end up talking about t-shirt sizing and planning poker. So estimation is valuable, and the tester's contribution to that estimation is valuable. But of course, it's not about doing test estimation now. It's team estimation, and the tester has to bring their element to it. So understanding estimation and its challenges and its importance, and the value of making sure that the testing aspect of the estimation is well covered, is very important. There's not much to say about metrics, but there literally isn't much to say about metrics in the ISTQB syllabus. Metrics is a thing that we should do. We have to track some things. Of course, Agile prides itself not on producing big fat reports full of metrics, but on demonstrating valuable software directly to the stakeholders, to the customers. Not giving them a report that says, I've run 1,000 tests, therefore it must be great, but here's the software, have a look at it, it's great. But we still will use some metrics. Velocity is a metric. So there's some discussion to have there, but perhaps again, perhaps a little bit less value. Business value of testing, I don't need to say anything about that. Just moving from a waterfall or Agile world to a V model world to an Agile world doesn't in any way diminish business value. In fact, of course, it enhances the importance of taking the business's position and understanding the business's position in the project, so that we can adapt and make sure we deliver value. So that's a conversation that's valuable. 2.8 is part of the syllabus, and it's essentially really only there for the exam. It's some definitions, doesn't play any real part for the discussion of testing in either a V model, waterfall, or Agile world. And finally, standards are a thing, and they're a thing for projects that are both waterfall, V model, or Agile. Of course, these days we see Agile being used in safety critical environments, so of course standards is still a topic. Now, the point of me dragging you through those, I was hoping, as I said at the beginning, not to do it like this. I wanted us to have more opportunity to bounce ideas backwards and forwards, but alas, not to be. But the point of the message I'm trying to get across is that these topics are mostly topics that we still need to discuss for people in an agile environment. But there were a couple of weak ones in there. Going back to the main list, there's a chapter called Reviews. If any of you have ever done an ISTQB Foundation or any of the other ISTQB courses, you'll know that it discusses reviews. But I always take some issue with this title when I'm delivering the Test Manager course, because in the foundation, the chapter is not called Reviews. In the foundation exam or course, the chapter is called Static Testing. And it's only changed to Reviews in the Advanced Test Manager. Now, I believe I know why that is. It's because of a slight change in the content. But when I'm delivering it, I still discuss it as static testing. That is an important point. Does static testing happen in an agile world? You know, if you think about static testing in the waterfall world, it's about taking documents, reviewing those documents, feeding errors back to the author so that the author can fix them. Does static testing have a place in an agile world? And the answer is, of course it does. We do keep documentation in an agile world. We keep just enough documentation, which we create for just the right audience, and we create it at just the right time. But it's still valuable and it's important. In fact, it should all be valuable and it should all be important, because we should be thinking carefully about whether we need it, and we should only really be creating it if it is needed. And if it is needed, then it jolly well ought to be clear. So some aspect of static testing, some aspect of checking that the documentation is appropriate and correct is appropriate. Now, I'm just talking about maybe informal reviews of user stories, but of course, agile teams will use walkthroughs of things quite often. So there's still opportunity for some of the more traditional reviews, but we wouldn't expect to see big technical reviews or inspections. But static testing can play another part as well. It can happen a little bit more dynamically, for want of a better word. Think again about that Three Amigos meeting that I mentioned, you know, which is the name I like to use, but people call it the power of three or the triumvirate or user story elaboration. But it is the meeting where the product owner brings a user story to the developer and the tester, and the three of them discuss to form the shared understanding of what we must build. The developer walks out with an understanding of what to build. The tester walks out with an understanding of what to test. But during that conversation, the static testing is happening live. When the product owner says to the developer, make it blue, and the developer nods and says, okay, I'll make a blue one, and I understand it should be blue. The tester is the little voice perhaps in the corner doing the static testing, who puts their hand up and says, hang on a minute, which shade of blue must we make it? Because I know that will bite me on the backside when we come to test. And it turns out you actually meant a specific blue. Now, that's a silly example just for a bit of fun, but you see the point that the tester, with their eye for the detail, with their understanding and thinking around expected results, can be making sure that points are made clearly at that point, during that communication. So static testing doesn't go away. As a chapter, a big part of the coverage is around the big formal reviews, and they have less value in an agile world. But it doesn't hurt, in my opinion, to know what they are and what their strengths and weaknesses are, so that we can think about carrying some of those strengths into our agile teams. Maybe we have to find a different way to achieve those strengths. Defect management, pretty obviously, is defect management. Defects have to be managed. I've never met a tester or a project or an environment where testers and defects, are not managing one. I said that sentence terribly badly, where the defects aren't being managed. I have never seen a project where the defects aren't being managed. I've never met a tester who works in a place where the defects aren't managed. I've seen some crazy ways of managing defects, from just writing them in emails and then putting them into a special folder called defects, to raising them in all sorts of different tools. But my particular favorite perhaps was the people who typed their defects in Notepad and then pressed print and took a piece of paper from the printer and punched holes in it and put it in a folder, and that was how they managed their defects. But they were managing them. And it doesn't matter whether you're waterfall or agile, you're going to manage your defects. So that topic is going to just be equally valuable in either world. But again, maybe the process changes. The topic of process improvement is a challenging one to discuss, perhaps, because for my money, the ISTQB's Test Manager course spends a lot of its time on process improvement models and wants to discuss formal models for process improvement. And they're not that exciting to me. So, you know, in either, they're valuable, but we don't spend enough time discussing actual process improvement. Things like lessons learned, and of course in Agile, retrospectives. And there's not enough emphasis on how a team really learns internally and how it gets better. And the advice we could be offering people on how to capture feedback in a lessons learned and how to select the valuable ones to carry into the next activity and actually adopt and get better with. That's just not done well. But it's not, you know, this is me being horrible about the TM course, and lovely course that I love to bits, but it spends its time on models, and discussing those models is equally valuable or valueless. Take your pick in waterfall or in agile. You know, they're models. These models do have agile versions, so you know they can help us with process improvement in agile. What I'd like to see is more discussion of how teams actually do it, and that would certainly be more valuable to an agile team because retrospectives are frequent and quick. So, as a chapter, very important. Agile is about process improvement. Agile is about improvement in general. It's about improvement of the software, improvement of the quality. It's about feedback loops coming back from the different stakeholders, project managements and product owners and customers and everybody. It's all about process improvement and improvement in general. But maybe this chapter could do a slightly better job. I'm keeping an eye on the time. I was told 35 minutes or so, but I you know, before we get to questions. So I'm trying not to hurry too much. We're getting there. Again, another topic that doesn't need a lot of explanation, does it? Tools. Tools is a fundamental part of software development. What's Agile's relationship to tools? Well, it's tools plus, isn't it? Agile is more caught up in automation and the use of tools to deliver value to the team, to make the team efficient and able to deliver. We simply couldn't do continuous integration and unit test execution and API test execution if we don't have tools to support that well. I've heard people say, and I've had arguments about this, but I've heard people say Agile is automation and automation is Agile. Now, I've argued about it. I don't pitch it that way. I understand, though, why those people have said it. They've said it because in their mind, as people working in software development and quality around software development, they understand that you're just not going to be able to do agile software development without tools. So in their head, there's become a really strong link between tools and agile. But the way I put it is slightly different. Not that agile is automation and automation is agile, but that agile software development as a behavior, as a way of working, as a circumstance or context in which we find ourselves, is a context in which automation, in which tools become essential. It has all of the requirements. It needs the efficiency of tools. It simply couldn't get all of the necessary testing and regression testing and implementations done without those tools. So it's not that Agile is automation and automation is Agile. It's that Agile as a behavior just absolutely ticks the boxes that say we need tools, we need automation. So you can almost say there that they go hand in hand. But there's lots of presentations out there these days showing that Agile can be used as a set of working practices in situations other than software development. And so it's not only about software development, so it's not only about automation. But Agile software development, which after all is where the word Agile was created, is going to need automation. So do we get value out of a discussion of tools, of their strengths, their weaknesses, of their benefits and their risks? Do we get value out of discussing selecting the right tool? Absolutely, of course we do. So that topic remains valuable to us. And lastly, people skills. Now, it's not a massive chapter in the ISTQB's Test Manager course. It's a historic, for my money, I don't know better, but having been there since the beginning of the original practitioner, there was a big piece on people skills in the original 10-day practitioner course. And that was there because this is 15 odd years ago. The practitioner course was the only training for test managers. So it tried to address everything for them. It tried to address all test management topics, all test analyst topics, all technical test analyst topics, and it tried to give them some help around people skills, motivation, selection, training, and so on. And as the ISTQB has come along and the course has been compressed down to a 5-day course, the people skills bit has shrunk a little bit, but I think it's a bit of a hang-on from those early days. But is it important if we move from waterfall to agile? Well, of course it's important. People, communication, teamwork, valuing one another. If you go on an agile course, they're bound to talk about forming, storming, norming, and performing as teams gel together and communicate and iron out their differences and compete and then settle down into a good pattern of behavior and maybe even reach the heights of performing to a high level. I'm going to say it's all about the people. A couple of weeks ago, I was on a course with some, I was sitting in, there was essentially the head of Expleo's Agile in Ireland and his right-hand man were delivering a course, and one of the people on that course made the observation that the key is the communication, that it's the people working together. And he was right. I think about the time I've spent with senior and very knowledgeable agile people, and they may use their own words. One of the people I look up to as a mentor, he likes to use the phrase shared understanding very often. Another one who I look up to as a mentor likes to use the phrase feedback loops very often. Both of them in their key little chosen words around agile use words that are about communication. So is it important to be having a conversation about teams, about people, about interactions, about communication, and about trust in an agile environment? Perhaps more so than it was in traditional. So this chapter has value. Now, like I said, I wasn't expecting or hoping to sit and just talk through this list in quite such a lecture-y way, but I was hoping we could chat a bit more. But hopefully you see what I've tried to do in a quick way is to look through the topics that are covered by the ISTQB's Test Manager course, examine them, see what they are, and see whether they are topics which, as well as being seen as valuable when that syllabus was written, which would have been way back in 2010 or so, and updated, as it was pointed out by Raoul in 2012 and not since. Are those topics valuable topics now? And I hope that I've pointed to topics and said, yeah, these are topics which we need to discuss now. These are still things that happen in an agile team as they would have done in a waterfall or V-model kind of environment. Because, like I said, right back at the start, most of what the course wants to do is not make beasts called test managers. It wants to talk about the principles of test management. And those principles don't go away. Testing is still testing. It still has the same goals. It still has the same challenges. It still has the same risks around it. So the topics are valuable. Are there some things in there which are passé? And again, that's Raoul's point. This syllabus is 9 years old now. Then perhaps yes. The test management documentation could do with a major overhaul. The metrics perhaps do with a major overhaul. The process improvement bit could recognize retrospectives and discuss good ways of doing retrospectives and the challenges that they pose. So the topics are valuable, but maybe it could do with a bit of freshening up. So could it benefit from an overhaul? Well, I just answered that question, didn't I? Yes. I personally think it's got value, but it needs an overhaul. And that's what my little conclusion slide says. Yes, it offers value. I enjoy delivering it. I'm going to be delivering the Advanced Test Manager next week, and I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be a particularly interesting go for it this time. And I really enjoy having the discussions, and I enjoy having the discussions with people in either waterfall or agile environments. But I would suggest that perhaps it is ready for its overhaul, and perhaps a bigger overhaul than the test analyst had, because it needs to better reflect an agile working world. And I think that's where I'm done. There is the lovely Debbie. Look, she's with us. So I pressed stop sharing just so that I can go back and see the interface. Stephanie says, isn't estimation completely different in agile and waterfall projects effort in the current week? Yes. Oh, yes. I mean, the estimation is a topic. Estimation is incredibly valuable, but it's it's like I said, it's incredibly valuable, but it's done differently. So perhaps that's another really good point. That's another place where the syllabus could be freshened up. Now, as it happens, when I deliver the Advanced Test Manager, I discuss story points and planning poker as part of the team estimation discussion that I have. So you're definitely right. It is different. I try and cover it, but I cover it because that's me rather than because the syllabus requires me to specifically. I'm seeing, is there anything else? Yeah, any other questions? I just see a thing that says we have 10 more minutes maximum, and I've just about used those up. So I think, folks, I'm done.
It seems that there's no any more questions further. But if you do have any,
forward everybody into submission.
All right. If you do have any questions, don't forget to write us to the Congress email address. And thank you very much for joining us, everyone. And thank you, Mr. Joe Elledge. It was a pleasure.
Well, it was less interactive than I hoped, but it was fun. I always like the sound of my own voice.
We do have one more last question from Michael Gumbrecht. Metrics are still valuable also in agile projects.
Yeah, perhaps I was a bit rude, but yes, some are because sorry, you're asking it as a question. Some certainly are because velocity is a metric. Story points are a metric; they are a number. But we're not, like I said at the time when I was going through it, I'm not thinking about producing great big fat reports full of numbers to put in front of stakeholders. We want to show stakeholders working software, but there's always some numbers that we're going to keep track of, absolutely. And maybe that's part of the discussion. Don't overdo it, guys. Just do the ones you need. Same as documentation. Do what you need when you need for the audience that needs them.
Thank you, Mr. Elledge. Thanks a lot, everyone, for joining us. Remember, if you get registered, you will get a surprise from A4Q Congress. Thank you very much. I will end this session. If you do have any questions, don't forget to write us to the A4Q Congress email.
Thanks very much.